Good evening, everyone. It is currently about 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time on November 20th, Tuesday night. It is Mod 12. This is week 2, and this is our second live session for this mod of DES109. So we're going to jump right in. It doesn't look like we have anyone right now. We might get some participants as we go, so we will just start from here. Looks like I have an issue there. Hold on one second. Here we go. We're going to share that one more time. There we go. As we go, there we go. So to start off, we have our live session 2 agenda. We're going to do a quick review. Very, very quick review. We'll talk about the discussion a little bit. I'm going to do a couple more critiques based on the amount of time it took yesterday to do the critiques. I probably won't be able to get through everyone's. However, if you're watching this and you would like me to critique your assignment from last week, feel free to shoot me a message, let me know, or pop into the multi-session and we can go over it then. And then I will be conducting a demo for assignment 2. And talking about assessment 2 a little bit and going over some tips for that as well. So week 2, the learning objectives are discussing the relationships between the basic design principles and elements and what they have with the foundations of graphic design. We're going to apply a design style to a composition. And we'll be using cultural influences of an era while we're doing that. And analyzing the design principle usage in your personal projects. So you'll be determining how you're using it so that you can actually explain it to another individual. Okay, and like I said, we're just doing a very quick review. Excuse me one second. Just kind of get some background noise there, so I wanted to eliminate it. Okay, so we're going to go over the announcements real quick, just a couple that I had put up last week, just to make sure that everyone had seen them. Some of them were kind of important. We already went over the learning objectives. I'm just going to point out the media, and like I said, we'll go over the discussion and the assignment and the assessment. So I'll shoot this down real quick right here so we can go look at the announcements. Okay, so right here we have, this was all last week, and the 19th was starting this week. Just to start out, we had the critique disclaimer. If there are any instances where there is something you actually don't want me including in a critique, just shoot me a message and let me know. Otherwise, I kind of assume everything is free game. I do not use names, so you don't have to worry about that. You know, we simply just talk a little bit about the project and things that we might be able to do to use to make it work better, things that really work well, and it actually provides not only you with feedback, but it also provides you with the ability to provide feedback to someone else. That's a huge part of collaboration in design, and that's in design, in the design field, not in design, the software. So that is actually a very important part of the whole industry. We have our class, oops, excuse me, here it is. Sorry. Our schedule for the class coach, Christy Paulson, was posted. Excuse me. And then last night the recording was posted in the live lectures and also in the announcement. And I actually also provided an announcement right here for how to watch the lectures, after how to download them and then to watch them offline. Several of you made mention that you were having issues with internet connectivity last week. totally understandable. Unfortunately, sometimes it's very unreliable. I had my own issues last week, and excuse me, my goodness. So I absolutely understand. It's also actually very useful if you happen to not have internet at home and need to actually go somewhere in order to watch the videos instead. So this actually provides you a chance to be able to download the videos much quicker, and then you can watch them on your free time. So so that was that. I think the next one was discussion. Oh, the media page. I'm sorry. Yep, wanted to make sure I get that quick. So in the modules, we have week 2. Excuse me, we have the overview, we have the discussion, the assignment, the assessment. But in order to have the information that you need for those portions of this week, we go to week 2. Here's the pre-recorded lecture. Again, I can't emphasize enough how absolutely important this message, this particular lecture is. It provides the basics. There were some portions of some projects last week that it sounded like there were more opinions than factual information, or that they weren't referencing the principles of graphic design. So if you don't watch these lectures, you're going to end up really missing out, because that's really the important information. It's like, your medical textbook in, Medicine 101. You need to make sure you're reading that information in order to be able to take the tests and everything. So make sure you watch those, whether it's all in a 2-hour shot or you break it down, doesn't matter. But it is important that you do that before you move on to the assignments and discussions. Excuse me. Visual elements, we have a quick PDF right here. Just a little bit of information as well. Copywriting tools for graphic designers. We have a link, and then the lynda.com playlist goes over various tools and techniques. They're all, you can take a look at 2.5 minutes, 5.5 minutes, or almost 5.5 minutes, 5 minutes. They're all very, very quick clips. And if you know some of these tools already, you can skip right over them. Or maybe you don't want to skip right over them and use this as a refresher. These are all for Adobe Illustrator, because that is the software that we'll be using for the project this week. And actually, I think I am going to need a refresher on this one right here, because I was looking at that last week. So I think I'm going to be watching that right after this particular lecture. I hadn't seen that before when I was going over the resources. So, so that's the media right there. Let's go down to the discussion portion. We'll go over that real quick. Discussion. Excuse me, my allergies obviously are bothering me today. Okay, so first, initially, it gives a little bit of background on the elements of design and what they are: point, line, shape, color, texture, and type, and how they collaborate with and how they work with the principles of design: contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. Excuse me. I believe Lisa Hammersheim actually references how design is kind of like a recipe. And contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity, these are kind of like the building blocks for the recipe. So you can kind of look at this as the main portion of the recipe. These are kind of like the individual ingredients that also make up the recipe. So the right combination of these elements put together in either the right order, the right format, in the right amounts, are going to produce an aesthetic design. Excuse me. When you live out in the East Coast or the Northeast, allergies run rampant. Okay, so now as we're going on to the prompt, imagine that you have recently redesigned the menu for your local coffee shop. The original menu was created by the owners themselves. The coffee shop owners wanted to keep everything in neutral shades of brown and decided to make all the words the same size and use a different font for every drink because they thought this would make the menu feel friendly and casual. Instead, customers began complaining that the menu felt confusing and hard to read. This is a scenario that is a lot more common than you might think, especially these days where people like to try to cut corners. So they will use, they'll have access to Microsoft Publisher or Microsoft Paint, God forbid. You would be unbelievably surprised at how many people do that kind of thing and just try to do it on their own, not realizing that there's a reason why there are professionals that do this kind of thing. Excuse me. So for the discussion, you are imagining that you've redesigned it and you created a simple contrasting color scheme, used different weights of the same font, set up a clear grid layout, and grouped beverages together so that the menu is now easy to scan. Customers have already commented on the positive change. I don't know that many people would actually complain about how difficult a menu is to read, but having an item that you need to redesign is very, very common, especially when it is something that a business owner has done on their own. That is unbelievably common. So this week, your prompt is, in describing the coffee shop owners what you did to redesign the menu, how would you explain design element and design principle usage? How would you tell them what you did and why you did it and why it works better than what they created? How do the elements and the principles relate? What principles might have been lacking in the original menu, and why might the design elements in the new menu now support the principles? So this is kind of like a precursor to your assessment for this week. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit. I don't want to jump ahead. So you very often in the design industry will have to back up your reasoning for why you created something the way that you did. And very often, if you are able to provide enough evidence and provide a good enough reason, you will be able to show your client why it is better, and they'll work with your design, though they will accept your design. So this is a very important part of the industry as well, being able to fully articulate the reasonings behind your design. And sometimes the customer will be very dead set on what they want, and it happens. But there's a reason why there are professionals in the industry, because they do it for a living. They know how to do it, and we are always looking to make ourselves better. So that is what your discussion is going to be for this week. Make sure that you use sources and make sure you cite them appropriately. Try to find some articles that might provide examples of the elements in the principal designs. You might want to take a look for some menu examples, or even branch out a little bit, look for invitation examples, because it's a very similar kind of thing. And try to figure out why designers did something one way or another, or why they maybe chose to not do something. The replies, you need to make sure that you have the one main post, the one substantive post, 150 words, due Wednesday night, the APA citation and reference as well, and then the other 2 responses of over 50 words. Excuse me. So that's that. Okay, so I am going to move right along. What we had here. Okay, we got the discussion. Assignment and assessment. Okay, we have gone through the media. Look at that. I have already covered all of this. And actually, I guess I hadn't covered completely all of it. I did cover the illustrative thing. I do actually want to emphasize the writing help. If you are struggling with grammar, if you're struggling to start your writing, feel free to contact the coach, the class coach, contact the Student Success Center. Even in addition to that, if you're maybe doing okay with the content but having some issues maybe with grammar, I don't know if I posted the information on Grammarly, but if I haven't already done that, I will make sure I do it. Grammarly is a tool that you can actually put in your browser. So when you are posting discussions, excuse me, and whatnot, it actually helps a lot with suggestions, different kinds of suggestions than what Microsoft Word can provide. So that can also really benefit, or, and use that in conjunction with your outside help, whether it's myself or the coach or, other one-on-one tutoring. Every little bit helps, and you do need to make sure that once you get into the field that you are able to express and communicate well. Okay, let's see. Are we ready for more critiques? Then let's do this thing. But first, right in the middle of this particular session, we're going to do today's secret question, which is, what is one of instructor Melissa Kinney's biggest fears? I know I mentioned in one of my lessons, I don't know if it was yesterday or if it was last week, I'm going to try to put these questions kind of in random places so that you don't know when they're coming. So what is one of my biggest fears? Spiders. Although this guy is kind of cute. I really just dislike them so much that I named my company after them. My company is Purple Spider Graphics. I also, although I wouldn't say this is one of my biggest fears, but I really don't like AI. My husband and I joke around that we're going to be ready when the robots take over because, just so much of the artificial intelligence just freaks us right out. So either one of those answers would be pertinent if you shoot me a message and let me know. I do very much enjoy getting those messages because it lets me know exactly who's watching them, and I mean most of the time that's indicative in the projects anyways, but this just kind of reinforces who the people that I know are watching and paying attention. So, okay, we are going to do just a couple more critiques before we move on. Okay, so now, sorry, my mouse just fell. I'm going to choose just one from each of the submissions that I have here. Let's see, let's take a look. I think I want to actually do this one right here. Excuse me. That way I can try to get to as many people as possible. I didn't realize yesterday exactly how long those critiques were going to take, and I mean, we probably could have talked about them all day long. So we have this individual's assignment. They chose the psychedelic era for this particular card. A really nice image here, and very nice font that kind of went with it, font choice. There is actually a decent amount of spacing in between the copy here, the text copy, and the image. I did find that there were a lot of instances where individuals were having trouble with this text kind of bumping into the image, and that is an example of paying attention to the proximity, the space between items, or where the items are located in relation to each other. And this individual did a fairly decent job. Probably could have maybe even given it a teeny little bit more space, but they did a really, really good job. One of the things I did notice in a lot of the cards actually is something that, especially with items that have large bodies of copy, are these broken up words. We have the word language right here that kind of is broken up. A lot of customers are going to request that and actually, let me rephrase that. It is likely that a lot of your customers will request that that is not something you include unless you're writing in a very, very large volume, magazines, newspapers, um, textbooks, things like that. You're probably going to get a lot more requests to try to keep the words on the same line. So that is something that you'll have to make sure that you are aware of. I recently did a pamphlet for a client of mine, and I went over it several times. My client went over it several times. I printed it. We went over it again. I have 3 of those on one page, and I was banging my head up against the wall because I couldn't believe it slipped by me, and I couldn't believe it slipped by them because they're very, very detail oriented as well. And unfortunately, is something that happens no matter how long you're in the industry. So just something to be aware of. This particular like I said, this particular individual did a really good job making sure there's space here for those that maybe found that it was a little bit too tight. That could potentially be adjusted simply by grabbing the text box and just making it a little teeny tiny bit more narrow, because by decreasing the width of the text box, you're essentially causing a boundary so that this text won't be able to spill out any further. Excuse me. We also, I actually am just noticing right here, if you notice the leading between these 2 lines is not the same as the leading between these 2 lines. That is something that happens in InDesign a lot, and that is also something that you just have to make sure that you are aware of. That will happen if you actually set up a certain amount of leading and then press enter. That'll happen. What probably is the reason why it happened here was we have this much larger type. That's probably causing a problem with it. You can very easily just select the entire line and then specify the amount of leading to the correct amount, and that will get fixed. We could probably even write a little bit more space in between here and here, these 2 lines right here. But otherwise, the proximity in this particular layout is very, very good. We have some broken up areas in between the categories. The margin around the outside is pretty much equidistant, which is good. We have some very nice contrast where we have the, your popular psychedelic kind of bubbly font for the headline here, along with the date, and then a little bit more of a simpler font for most of the body copy, which makes things a little bit easier to read, which is good. Also, some contrast in the size of the category here in using the underline. It also breaks up the copy, that it causes your eye to jump to the underline, you read it, and then you're drawn to the rest of the paragraph to find a little bit more about that individual category. Something also to note, this individual also had some contrast in color, which I didn't see a ton of. There were a few instances. They used colored text. I myself even forget that I can do that sometimes if I'm on a white background. It is very easy and understandable to simply put black text on top of a white background, but using a couple different colors is actually it provides a nice variety. Excuse me. It's also very well aligned on the left-hand side here. And another thing that I actually noticed, this individual had a nice, the centers, horizontal centers here were very well aligned. So despite the fact that the psychedelic era text and then the bottom text here kind of sticks out a little bit past, past the top and bottom of the image, it still looks balanced, which is obviously important. And this individual also has the repetition of the same type of typeface. I'm sorry, same kind of typeface. I shouldn't have used that word twice. both in the blue and the black. And despite the fact that the body copy here is smaller, it is the same text here. So we have the repetitive look to it. And excuse me, the back here kind of extends the colors and these kind of anamorphic shapes, these organic kind of looking shapes, which look very similar to the text here, the psychedelic text. So that continues to give off the kind of psychedelic look. This particular text, we could probably actually take this and scooch this over so that the whole thing is within this blue area, and that probably would look a little bit more balanced, as opposed to going right over on top of the pink area here. And when you start to get to small text, this is actually just kind of like a rule of thumb, not necessarily a critique of this individual by any means. When you start to get real small, the font choices that you make can be very, very important because things will start to get very difficult to read. This one is not bad at all, probably because it's a fairly bold font, but the smaller you get, the more difficult it is to read. As kind of standard in the industry when I was working in a direct mail company, we did menus and coupons and all sorts of advertisements. And the standard kind of was not to go any lower than 6-point font for disclaimers. And every time we used a disclaimer, we used a fairly simple font and usually kept it bold as well. So I kind of try to keep that in mind when I'm doing smaller text. Other than that, it's nicely aligned with the bottom. Even though it's close, it doesn't feel like it's kind of gonna fall off the edge there. Excuse me. Actually, I'm looking at these sources, and it actually looks like these are actually two different sources. So we could probably separate them a little bit just with an extra bit of spacing in between these two lines. Overall, very, very nice job. We'll go to, we'll go to this next one. And I'm actually going to skip it because we did that one. Oh, here we go. Here's a good one. Because I think we had done the psychedelic one yesterday. Okay, here we go. So for this is the arts and crafts era. And this particular, I actually really love this. It's kind of got like a Weeping Angels from Doctor Who kind of look to it. So this individual decided to keep their main body copy as a serif font, but it's a fairly standard serif font, which makes a lot of sense, especially for this particular era. I like this arts and crafts title. Not only do I like the font itself, but it, I think, works well with the image. Excuse me. When doing a lot of paragraph copy, just be careful using italics. Italics typically mean that you're trying to emphasize something, or maybe that someone is, if it's in a book of some sort, it can mean dialogue, whether it's inner or outer dialogue. So you want to be careful when you're using the italics. This particular setup for this flashcard, you could very easily use the italics for the timeline, for the name and the creator, and then keep everything regular, and that would work out very well. It would provide a nice amount of contrast, and so it would create that separation between these categories, or these bullet points, and still invite you to read the rest of it, and it would still be readable though. Proximity, actually have some nice spacing here. We do have another broken word right here. I think I probably saw that on every single card, and that, don't worry about it. That is an absolutely understandable thing, and like I said, I do it too. Just something to watch out for. Let's see. Let's go on to this next one. I very much like this particular color palette. I just thought it was really very interesting to look at. We have the repetitive circular shapes. And the fact that they're all overlapping, they kind of, the use of proximity here is very interesting because they overlap enough, but not too much. Because even this little teeny one here, I almost feel like this looks like an olive. So it still gives an interesting shape. Excuse me. I almost feel like there's something missing here though, because of this extra white space. So maybe either by taking this this dark circle and moving it down a little bit, or maybe if the citation were placed here, that would kind of balance out the entire composition. But overall, that, you know, that nice color selection. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, my mouse, I have to not use this again next time. It's just too trigger happy. So let me say contrast, repetitive, alignment, proximity. We have left alignment. It's actually, the alignment's actually very kind of similar to the previous one. And actually, I think I'm going to move on to the next slide because I want to make sure I don't run out of time. And if I have any extra time at the end of this lecture, I will maybe do one more critique, and then anybody else that wants critiques can come in on Friday to the multi-session. And I'm doing that at the same time as I normally would. Excuse me, 4:30 Mountain Time, I believe. Oh no, I'm sorry, you guys are behind me. 12:30 Mountain Time, 12:30 p.m. Mountain Time. So we got some demos or demo of the assignment, okay? And just to start out, this is the assignment in 5 steps, very broken down. Choose and research the period that you're looking at. And I'm sorry, I just clicked that. Set up your Illustrator document, 300 by 600 pixels. All this information is in the requirement section. Use the provided text and apply appropriate font and elements. I'll show you that in just a sec. Make sure to apply the principles, the lovely crap principles. Save the Illustrator file, export it to PDF, and submit. Please make sure when you submit your document in the comment section to tell me which era you are working from, because it may not be clear to me, and I want to make sure that I can grade your assignment. If you don't include the era, I may not be able to grade your assignment, and then it could end up being late. So make sure that you do that. Excuse me. So, just to go back to the assignment area quick. Right now we are this is the discussion area. Week 2 assignment, the advertising makeover. It's a little bit of background here. I'll let you read that on your own so I don't waste time here. So in the assignment, we'll be designing a web banner based on inspiration from a past era of design. So you are going to take one of the 3 eras that you used in assignment 1. There was a little confusion on this one. You do not need to match anything that you did. You simply need to take one of the eras that you already researched for last week's assignment and create your web banner based on that era. You do not need to match colors or anything from something that you picked. This is, look at it as last week was the research, this week is creation. Excuse me. So, and then it says if you didn't complete the assignment, choose an error from this file. This file just has the list of the errors that's from the last week. Next, download this file of content, which I actually already have, but I will download it again just so you can see. Okay. And open it right up. Open it right up. Sorry, this should not be taking this long. It's probably because I have the other programs open as well. So this particular document has the text copy that you're going to use, and you will find this very often in the professional world, where they will give you the copy that they need you to include, and you need to run with it. So obviously don't use the word text, but this text right here is everything that you need to include in your banner. If you want to change the excuse me, the date to 2019, that is absolutely fine. I won't take points off if you don't. That would be kind of a red flag in a professional scenario, where you would need to inquire with the client and make sure that that's actually accurate, or if they want a current date. Sometimes there are going to be people that want you to do it exactly how it's written out. So just to kind of give you an idea from the benchmarks here, excuse me, we'll look at those in just a second. So you're going to take those, that text copy, and your era that you have looked at. You're going to use Illustrator and create an ad 300 by 600. Here are the submission requirements, the file name and file type. Okay. And this is kind of what, this can give you an idea. Obviously, you don't want to do exactly this, but this is an example of one of the benchmarks. So you can see that they've included all of the different text elements. I think that this was the Swiss era. I'm not certain. And actually, we have one more here that I believe was in the Art Deco style. Sorry, I would not have. There we go. I would have had this initially loaded as well, but I had been going back and forth between the pages. So, so you can see this individual used some of the elements of the design elements of design. We have shapes, we have lines, we have color, no texture, although you could definitely, you could even maybe kind of consider this a texture, especially if it was, if there were more in there. Excuse me. This individual, the copy is not all, written in one paragraph. So they've made kind of an angular kind of grid, very typical of the style. So you're going to, if we go back here real quick, you figure out your style. You're going to look at some examples and analyze the different elements: point, line, shape, color, texture, and type. And then you're also going to analyze the contrast, the repetition, alignment, and proximity, the same thing we've been doing for the last week and a half now. Make notes as you're scrolling through them, or as you're flipping a book, if you happen to be actually looking at a book. Sketch things out if that's something that you can do. Find those individual components and try to figure out what is most prominent in that particular style. You'll use Illustrator to convert to vector, and then modify the style of the image as you need to. And we will go over that right now. Okay, I'm gonna go and illustrate. Here we go. This is the one that I had put together actually in the last mod, and I'm gonna delete this right here. This was done in the grunge style, and I'm gonna actually start from scratch here so you can see what how we go about and do that. Excuse me. Now, if you start with Illustrator and it gives you that dialog box where you can create your new document, you can start from there. I wanted to have this open for you guys already. So you can start with File, New, and the dialog box is going to pop up, or it should pop up. Oh no, my screen sharing is paused. Oh no. I am going to share that again. Oh God, I really hope it caught stuff. It's actually good that I saw that right there before I did the demo. I hope I just accidentally clicked it. I'll have to look at that after this. Okay, so we have the new document. Okay, and oh, goodness gracious, I'm sorry. This format is not what I'm used to, my goodness, because I just updated. There we go. Art and illustration. Here we go. Now, I do want to make sure that I point out that the 300 by 600, oh my goodness gracious, is going to be in pixels. Please make sure that you change that because this is supposed to be for the web. That's important. 300 by 600 inches won't work. 300 by 600 points won't work. You want to make sure that that's correct. And industry standard is width by height. So it is 300 by 600, not 600 by 300. Okay, so the orientation is accurate. Okay. And we don't have to worry about bleed because this is not a print project. Come on. Sorry, it's just taking a lot longer than I would like. Goodness gracious. Let me try that again. And if this actually doesn't go through, then I will just kind of break down what I had already created. There we go. I must have accidentally hit close instead. Okay, so what I would personally do, what I actually like to do when I have something like this, whether I have 4 or 5 lines of copy or I have 300 lines of copy, I typically like to get into my document and copy it right in there. And then I actually kind of break it off to the side. And that way I have everything in there and I kind of delete as I go and I make sure that I have absolutely everything that the client needs. So now when I was working on this grunge project, I wanted to, first of all, Sky Studios, I made as a skydiving place. You can have it be whatever you want. It can be a photograph studio. It can be a trampoline park. It can be whatever you would like. You can make it completely generic if you really don't want to specify. That's, like I said, completely up to you. Your artistic license this week. So I actually used an image, and this is absolutely okay as long as you are still using Adobe Illustrator. The basis for my image is actually a photograph that I applied some effects to and then brought into Illustrator. So I'm going to do that. File, place. And I'm actually going to use the JPEG version, despite the fact that that's not the one that I used, because it will not be as large. So you can see now the grunge era didn't have a ton of clear photography. So I used some splatter effects. I actually used a combination of some vector artwork along with Photoshop to kind of get this kind of painted look to it. Huge thing you want to make sure you do is save, because you never know what would happen. And that is very, very common to lose work. Excuse me, when you are using these programs. Right now, I am actually going to create a clipping mask because this particular image is a little bit too wide. And so there we go. Items like that, if you need help, feel free to let me know. I can, there are definitely other tutorials out there. Excuse me, but if you have specific questions, I'm more than happy to help. So I chose to include this text let's, I'm actually going to back up just a little bit here. I'm going to copy and paste this one because I just noticed that we're running out of time again. My goodness. So let's take a look. Actually, we have Sky Studio. We have the name right here, and I had a little effect that I added to it. Okay. So I'm going to delete that. Grand opening. I had put grand opening along the side here, right along with the date, because people are going to know, are going to want to know when the grand opening is. So I put those two together. Bingo. 20% off all retail. That's kind of like a feature. So I actually isolated that right here so that people would also see that. And visit skystudios.com is kind of like an afterthought, so it's a much smaller text. It's right at the bottom. You can see I used a grungy kind of distressed looking font. I think it's called Urban Jungle, I think is what it was called. You can also see I used some brushes to create these funky splatter paintings in the background too. Right. This artwork is all vector, as you can see. After I actually created it and typed it out, I converted it all so that I wouldn't have any issues. And then I happened to miss one, so that when I opened this up today, this was actually not the correct font because I'm on a different machine. That is also something you'll need to make sure that you pay attention to in your professional world. You know, would want to make sure you could use your tools here that you'll learn about in or refresh in those lynda.com playlists. Okay, we have the direct selection tool and selection tool up here, the pen tool, the shape tool, the text tool, or type tool, excuse me, excuse me, and kind of play around, see if you can incorporate the elements to create something of that style. To save it as a PDF, save as, and PDF. I realized that last week there were some people that had some issues. They didn't know how to do that in InDesign, so I want to make sure I include that here. Okay. So again, I don't want you actually copying my project right here. This is just supposed to be a kind of example to kind of give you some ideas of what you can do. This is part of this course, is having you kind of think on your own and try to come up with these designs on your own. And if the flashcards from last week were any indication, all of you are going to come up with some great work. I just know it, because for a first assignment, that was really, really, really great. So for this assignment, make sure if you are having issues, like I said, for example, you know, you're trying to figure out filters, or you're trying to figure out what tools you need to use, or how to create the clipping mask like I just showed you. I mean, that was a very, very brief thing. There are lots and lots and lots of tutorials in Adobe, on YouTube. Don't go crazy with effects if they're not appropriate. If you're looking in Art Deco, maybe you could use a metallic kind of effect to it, like a gradient, but a lot of that is a lot more clean looking. Postmodern kind of look is very collagey, if that's a word. So something like that might be better off. Imagery and graphics, if you find something that's really too low quality, low res, you might need to copy it and trace it, make it a high resolution image. Or do you want to trace it and then actually modify it so that it is applicable to your era? Excuse me. Use the appropriate fonts. I went over Adobe Fonts and DaFont last week, using appropriate colors. And actually, Adobe Color Exploration, I actually have not gone over that. I'm sorry. I had meant to actually go over that, but we're not going to have time at this point. Self-check the CRAP and principles, and actually go over the rubric again and make sure that you've got everything in there. And then take notes for your assessment. Your assessment essentially is going to be a critique. Like I said, this was the discussion was a precursor to your assessment. Okay, you're going to write out in, you can do it in InDesign, or you can do it in Microsoft Word, whichever is easier, but it needs to end up in InDesign. And then make sure to use your spelling and grammar checks so that everything is punctuated correctly, everything's spelled correctly. Cover the points in the assessment. Okay, well, actually, we'll go over that real quick, but very, very briefly. Oh, and just, just a reminder, you have those rubrics right underneath, your assignment and assessment information. So you can go through it piece by piece, make sure you got everything. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Wrong one. Man, I feel like I'm all over the place today, so I apologize. Okay, so you have the rubric right below here. Just go right through it. Are you following instructions? Was it submitted on time? Is your spelling and grammar correct? Are you demonstrating understanding of the assignment's topicals? You can just boom, 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 just check them right off. And that is a great way to ensure that you have the maximum number of points. Okay, so we have the assignment. We have your prompt right here. Through your written critique, the assessment will assess your ability, that's a little redundant, to reflect and write about the project you've created. Okay, so like I said, you'll be doing a self-critique, explaining what it is you created, why it is you created it, how it relates to the era, which design principles that you used, and any elements that you used, how they work together, and how they make your piece better. And then provide a brief summary recapping the design challenge and how your solution best fits the requirements. And at the bottom of it, make sure to include that image as well. So you're going to have at least 2 pages. Excuse me. Here's the instructions right here, piece by piece. Okay. Again, you can just boom, 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 cover the bullets. Really briefly introduce the project, describe the elements used in the composition and the principles, explain why you chose the elements and the principles you did, how each element and principle makes your piece stronger. You have your summary paragraph explaining how your design addresses the overall design challenge. Compose your paper using InDesign on a letter-sized page, which I didn't specify that, I suppose. And then place your ad on the second page, like I mentioned, so I can refer to it while I'm actually reading your analysis. Here's the minimum number of words and your submission requirements. And these two, the assessment and the assignment, are due on Saturday at midnight, per usual, or 11:59 per usual. And I'm just trying to make sure that I got it all. Going backwards here. Okay. Yeah, so a lot of these are just covered, actually. So cover the listed points, copy and place your ad, and or place the PDF into the InDesign document. Save the InDesign file. Hang on to that InDesign file. You are going to want those for future reference, possibly not even in this course, but maybe on your portfolio or your capstone. So you're going to end up essentially with at least 2 files. You're going to have your PDF and your InDesign file. That's okay. That's completely common. I think I have most of my work. I think I have an InDesign file, a PDF, and an InDesign markup file, which will open up with lower versions of InDesign, because I have a couple of machines and they don't all have the same version. So that's very, very common. You'll probably end up getting really used to that. And then please make sure that you actually submit the PDF, not the InDesign file, because I cannot see the InDesign file in the Gradebook. Okay, and just to end on a note, this was used in one of the pre-recorded lectures, just in kind of a basic definition. Graphic design is a creative process that combines art and technology to communicate ideas. The designer works with a variety of communication tools in order to convey a message from a client to a particular audience. The main tools are image and typography, which is a great, succinct definition of what graphic design is. It's wordy. I very much liked the definition in the pre-recorded lecture, which is, it just explains how it is visual communication. I mean, I think that those two words just convey it a lot better. But this is a very succinct, very comprehensive definition. So, and we want to make sure that our designs communicate effectively. So we're always trying to get better. I'm always trying to get better. And I really enjoyed looking at those assignments this week. So I can't wait to see what you guys come up this week. It is just really, really neat to look at other things, which is why I'm in this business. So again, if you guys have any questions, email me, call me, come into the multi-session on Friday. And otherwise, I wish you all happy Thanksgiving, travel safely, and I will talk to you online soon.